Okay, thank you for shortlisting me, by the way. I was very delighted to be shortlisted. I wasn't expecting it. I was absolutely delighted. I'm very surprised. Just very quickly, I was brought up in South Yorkshire, in East Yorkshire, sorry, a place called Cottingham, just outside of Hull. My mum was a teacher. My dad was an engineer, so I've always been encouraged. I'm the only girl out of three brothers, so I've always been used to putting myself forward. And I think that I've always thought about architecture and particularly housing since I was a very young child. I studied architecture in Sheffield, and I actually worked for Sheffield Council in my year out. And that was at the late 90s, late 80s. It was the height of Thatcherism. And it was at a time when council housing was being sold off left, right and centre, and there was no new council housing being built at the time. These were very desperate times. People were living in poverty, people living on the edge. And I think that really kind of opened up my eyes to the importance and the impact that housing has on people's lives. And I've always been extremely committed to social housing. And I think the reason being is, why should people who are living in poverty live in poor quality housing? Why should that happen? I think it was a massive achievement after the war, when we built 1 million new homes, when there was a mass council house building programme, because I think for the first time for many people, it was a time when they could stop worrying about sky-high rents, about terrible landlords, about poor living conditions. So it's a massive improvement. And we know from plenty of research the terrible effects that poor housing has on people's well-being. But I mean, conversely, we also know the massive impact, the massive positive impact that good quality, well-designed, well-lit, warm, inspiring places that people are lifted by living in, how that affects people's mental health, their physical health, and also children's education. So it basically affects people's life chances as they go forward. And I've seen, as I'm sure we all have, we've seen over the past few decades, the way that various Conservative governments have tried to roll council house building back and roll back the role of the public sector. But it's something that I passionately believe in, and it's something that I think is worth fighting for. So this is what inspires me, and this is what drives me. So just in terms of the actual architecture that has inspired me, when I first got to Sheffield, I worked on Darben and Dark's Marquis estate, and also on the Betkins Spa Green estate as well. And I think both of these are fantastic examples of a responsive, modern, contextualized modernism. They're both modern schemes, but they're responding to an Islington tradition. And I worked on both of these schemes, refurbishing both of them, and I learned a lot from them. And I think the sort of schemes I've been working on for the past 15 years or so, sort of schemes I've been developing, have kind of sort of met at this sort of junction, at the intersection between these modernist interventions and Islington's more traditional 18th, 19th century street patterns. So these are difficult sites often, and these are the sort of sites that I know very well and know very intimately. I've worked in Sheffield, in Islington for about 25 years now. So these are the sort of areas that I know very intimately. I'm very good at sort of working out what needs to be done. So just moving on quickly, so these are a couple of schemes I did. King Henry Street, this is a Rundle Grove, again, sort of this intersection between the modern and the sort of 19th century. So the first scheme I just quickly want to cover is the scheme that I first did, the first new build scheme I did at Islington. It's called Armour Close, and it was the first new housing, this was back in 2007, the first new housing that Islington had built for over 20 years. And it was a very difficult site. You can sort of see the site here. It was overlooked by the prison officer accommodation. This is Pentonville Prison at the back here. Prison officer accommodation, Wellington Mews here, housing schemes along here, the Centurion Close housing scheme here. So it's a very, very difficult site. It was overlooked on all sides. It felt very dark and forbidding. A lot of antisocial behaviour, very popular destination for the London Fire Brigade. And when the planning officer came to have a look at it, he basically said to me that, he said, well, it's undevelopable. You're not going to get anything on here. It's, you might as well just forget about it. So I think for me at that point, that was sort of it really. The gauntlet was down, and I set about trying to design something that tackled these problems. And the way that I did it was designing a terrace, a series of 4 courtyard houses with their sort of principal rooms looking into the private courtyard. The 3-metre high wall that spans along the edge of the site, we couldn't go any higher than that. So what that allowed me to do, because of obviously it would sort of impact and overlook the Wellington Mews prison officer accommodation. So what that allowed me to do was to design the scheme with a sort of 2-storey frontage to the block, and sort of pitching down basically to the rear, where I've got all sorts of various ancillary accommodations, stores, bathrooms, etc., corridor. But what that also gave me the opportunity to do was look to design an almost sort of double height living space in the centre of the plan that was absolutely flooded with light, and it also received light from the big patio doors to the courtyard here. So it's an open plan, sort of living, dining, kitchen space. So the space itself ended up being extremely nice. The residents absolutely love it. It's just a plan showing the courtyards and the living space at the back here, kitchen, dining area here. And also what it allowed me to do, what the set also allowed me to do was create a little sort of communal play area actually, so which sort of rationalised the rather awkward sort of unrationalised shape of the site, which was an old car park. So that was the first scheme that I did, and that got nominated for the Housing Design Awards in 2009, 10, and I was absolutely beside myself. And then it went on to win the National Housing Design Award in 2010. So again, I had to sort of scrape myself up off the floor when that happened. I was absolutely delighted. So the second scheme that I want to just look at is the Centurion Close block that I did. And that was the latest one I've done, actually, the last one that I did. And again, it was a very difficult site. It was surrounded by housing. It got a railway line, the overland line at the back here. It got the Centurion Close estate, housing association blocks to the other side. It was a very, very tight, pinched site. A lot of antisocial behaviour. It was sort of derelict part of the estate. The housing department at some point in years previous had decided that the way to tackle the antisocial behaviour was to fence off this sort of old historic route that used to lead down to Caledonian Road. But obviously all that did was just exacerbate the situation. There's, again, masses of antisocial behaviour. Again, a very sort of popular destination for the London Fire Brigade. So that allowed me to open up that route. It connected the existing Centurion estate back onto Caledonian Road with all the transport, the shops, etc. The residents here were delighted. You know, it provided overlooking all the little awkward spaces that were left over behind these blocks, were filled with bicycle storage, with bin storage, but creating a sort of a firm edge to that route. So eliminating antisocial behaviour completely from there. The sort of floor plan itself is sort of an open plan living space with semi-open plan to the kitchen area, with massive tall floor to ceiling height windows that span the width of the room, opening onto big deep balconies. This is on the first floor, but the properties on the second and third floor have got fantastic views over London. It really sort of, you know, brings the outside in. This is a little floor plan showing the railway line there, the route down, and the floor plan here. What I did with the communal space was create this big freestanding staircase that sort of went up through the middle of the communal space, top lit. And again, when you speak to residents, they really love it. They feel that it gives the space a sense of community. They can have a chat, they can bump into each other. It's got good quality tiling. It just feels somewhere where people can sort of be neighbourly towards one another. There showing the floor plans as you go up. Each of the elevations were treated slightly differently, with balconies and offset balconies and what have you. There's a couple of shots from the ground floor, so sort of active frontages here with the ground floor flats opening up onto the street. So in terms of ambitions for the future, we've got a couple of large schemes on the go at the moment, one at Harvest Estate, one at Beaumont Rise, 24 dwellings and 20 dwellings respectively. So I suppose in terms of my ambitions for the practice, you know, I want to go on and continue to design good quality housing for people in Islington, bearing in mind Islington's carbon zero target for 2030. And also what I want to do is look to start to offer architectural services to other London authorities, and possibly even further, because I've got a real sort of expertise now and a skill in developing very tight, tricky sites, and I think it's something that, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of those in London, and it's something that I want to continue to do and offer our services to other London authorities. But finally, just to wrap up, I think my proudest moment was when I was leaving the house at King Henry Street. The woman, she had a daughter who lived there. The daughter was about to go back into sixth form. She was a young black woman, and the mother asked me what A-levels she needed to take to become an architect, because she said that her daughter was going back into sixth form, and she'd loved living in that house, and she too had decided that she would also like to become an architect. So I guess, just to sort of wrap up, ambition is to continue to provide, you know, good quality, decent housing for the next generation. But if I can, I hope to inspire the next generation as well. And this is the school that I designed, which is the one that she actually went to as well. This is Islington Arts and Media School. And this is another one of my schemes, Line Street, shoved in at the end. And that's the end.